Ron, thank you for coming on today. Could you please start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your journey to where you're at today?
Well, that's a loaded question, man, but I'll
Oh,
give
we
it my
got time.
best. So my journey is a life journey, and that's the reason for my latest book, The Velocity Mindset. But basically, a quick bio. I started my sales career in the School of Hard Knocks, selling copiers door to door. From there, I went to the computer industry and rose to the ranks into sales management. And that was about the first 10 years of my career, at which time I started my current career 31 years ago in 1988, November, which happened right after a family tragedy. It worked out okay, but I had some significant issues. I had to deal with my parents' health, and due to a major accident. And at that time, I was working in the computer industry, and a lot of computer companies were being shaken up with the PCs coming out, and they didn't know what they were doing. So, what this tragedy taught me, Dan, was that you need to create your own destiny, not be the destiny of others. And so the tragedy taught me that I can get by and survive anything if I keep my focus on it and know where I want to go. So I decided to quit my job and start this own business. If I didn't have that tragedy, I would never have started this business. And for the last 31 years, I started in sales training and then evolved into advisory services, the board of directors, working with C-suite personnel and trying to move their companies up the growth ladders, and doing some keynote speaking and writing some books. And I enjoy doing it.
Not just some, a lot. So I want to commend you on what you've accomplished. That's amazing. But being born out of tragedy and turning a negative into a positive, that's inspirational. And the reason I wanted to say that is because kudos to you, because a lot of people will curl up on a ball. And one of the points that you make is, and I don't see it right in front of me, but oh, here it is. I love your premise. What would the world look like if everyone acted like a leader and not a victim of circumstances? I absolutely love that. To me, that is something that I think is wrong with this world is people don't take personal responsibility.
Right.
Can you share your thoughts around that or how you came up with that statement?
So let's unpack that a little bit. It is the premise of the book, The Velocity Mindset. Um, so that story about the tragic car accident that I had to navigate was just one of many things since I was born that I had to deal with. In the book, I talk about a debilitating speech impediment that prevented me from enunciating the letter R, which is bad for any young boy. But when his name is Ron Karr, it's a double whammy. And when you can't even say your own name and you're mercilessly bullied. And so I had to learn at an early age what it was like to be on the other end of bullying and how to deal with it, and to realize, hey, it's not their issue, it's yours. Because if you don't like the reaction, change your actions. And it led me to going to get it fixed, through a speech pathologist and having to focus. So I learned at an early time. And what I wanted to unpack with you, what you said was, stuff does happen to us. It doesn't mean you don't get angry. It doesn't mean you don't get sad. It doesn't mean you don't get depressed a little bit. I've been through all those emotions in my life. But the question is, at some point, do you get up and realize that it's up to you to change it, not for anybody else? That's what we want everybody to acknowledge. That's what's called personal responsibility. I also grew up in a childhood that had a lot of adversity at home. My father was a victim of the Holocaust. He was in a Siberian camp for 2 years. He witnessed horrible tragedies. And it's been known for Holocaust survivors that when they had children, there was abuse in the house, sometimes verbal, sometimes physical. We're not talking sexual, we're talking physical.
Right.
Simply because, they're kind of damaged and they want to protect you so much, they love you so much. All they know the world to be is what they came from. And so their reactions are kind of like over the top. And it caused me a lot of headache. And it got in the way of my relationship with that. So I learned at an early age, when you have the abuse coming, you crawl up in a ball as a young child. You feel there's no way out and you have to deal with it. And look, I had some help as I got into my adult years with some therapists, but at the end of the day, it's up to us. And what I want to say is, so I was working with a wisdom teacher a few years ago. And we went back to my experience with my father. And then this was the turning point she had for me. This is what I want everybody in your show listening to understand. Like I said, it's not what happens to you, it's what you do with it. She said this to me. She goes, look, whatever your father did was for his own reasons. You really don't know his reasons why he did it. But what happens is when someone says something or does something to us, we then internalize it, and we have a perceptions to what we think it means. In other words, we create a story around it. And that's it. It's just a story. It's not reality. So if the story serves you, because every story is emotionally fueled, if the story serves you well, keep doing it. But if the story doesn't serve you well, then the good news is whoever wrote that story, it's simple. You can rewrite the script. It's your story. So when you realize that, it takes away a lot of the emotion that you're feeling and a lot of the anger. But it took me a long time to realize that. And that's what I went on my journey. So my goal for this book, which was actually born out of another setback after my presidency of NSA, I had 9 surgeries, mostly on my back. And at 57 at that time, you're not speaking, you're kind of down for a couple of years, and you think about all your successes, which there were a lot. But then you think about the things you didn't do, and you realize you didn't do them because of your own personal stories and fears. So all of a sudden, the runway is getting short in my life, and I realized you want to get to these things, you better get your on a saddle and get going. And so that's where velocity mindset came. But when you study velocity, well, Dan, let me ask you: when you hear the word velocity, what's the first word that comes to your mind?
Well, I just think of the first thing. I'm trying to think of the word I wanted to use: perpetual motion. I think of a rock or a snowball that is going down a hill that's picking up velocity.
Right.
Something that is a perpetual motion that's picking up that additional energy to speed it on its way.
You're right. And that's what a lot of people think, but that's not it.
Okay.
That's all it is. It leads to burnout. Meaning, how many times are we running, doing our to-do list? At the end of the day, we're so exhausted, we didn't have time to eat. And then we ask ourselves the question, what did I really accomplish? We're task-driven, but we're not purpose-driven. The physics definition of velocity is speed with direction. And direction is the key. This is what's missing in everybody's life. The C-suite personnel are either going after the direction that the CEO mandated, but they don't believe in it. They think it's the wrong direction. They have no idea how they're going to get there. And everybody thinks they're on the same page and they're not. All right. For a salesperson making a sales call, and if I ask that person, what's your sales cycle? 5 calls to close a deal. What call is this? Number 1. What's your goal? Oh, I want to close a deal. Well, that's not a valid goal. That means all you're going to do is puke people who have the knowledge about everything on why you're so good. You're going to keep closing. You're never going to be asking questions about where that customer wants to go, and you're going to be kicked down your butt. A valid direction for that call would be to qualify the account to make sure it's a good prospect for both of you and to identify a path forward. That's why that direction is so key. I mean, Dan, if you went to Newark Airport and you got on a plane, you asked the pilot where we're going, and he said he had no clue, would you stay on that plane?
No.
No, he wouldn't. But a pilot starts with the end in sight, the direction. He wants to go to Miami. He starts with Miami. He comes back and goes, what's the 3 or 4 waypoints that I know if I pass over them, I'm on my way. Then he looks at the potential storms and winds, and he comes around with a path, a flight plan that gives him the safest and fastest possible way to get there. That's what we have to do, because that direction is what dictates the actions you should take. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, that's purpose-oriented. But if we're task-oriented, we're doing a lot of things that are not germane to the direction, and that's why we get burnout. And that's why in my life, I was on that, treadmill, like the mouse, and doing a lot of things, but at the end of the day, saying, how does this really give me the fulfillment that I want? So I learned that throughout my whole life, and the whole mission for the book was simple. It's for salespeople, it's for leaders. And by the way, who's a leader? All of us. We lead our families, we lead ourselves, we lead others, all of us are leaders. So for those who accept the fact that they're a leader, and for salespeople or people of influence, this book was written out of my lifetime experiences, my successes with my clients, and that, and how they got some significantly big deals that changed their company's fortunes. And I just wanted to leave this and put it out in the world to create a velocity movement so that everybody, wherever they are in their lives, can get unstuck or move further along if they're doing well, and understand that they have the control of how far they go and what they do. It's not dependent on others, and to own it, because when you do, that's when you're going to go further and be more fulfilled in life.
Love that. So could you please go back and talk more about what was the origin? What was the thing that caused you to wake up and say, aha, I have a mission. I need to do this. I need to teach and share this gift, this skill, this mindset with others.
Well, like I said, the origin was from day one when I grew up, my family and all that. But the turning point, if you will, was when I was recuperating from those back surgeries. I was very bored. I just finished the pinnacle of my career, being the president of the National Speakers Association, making friends all over the world. And it was a pretty unique and inspiring situation. And then I come back and, I was known as being a sales trainer. I hate that tag. I mean, I still do it when I need to, and I'm good at it, but that's not what I do. I help companies, I help individuals get to where they really want to be by looking at that direction and helping them figure out what the best things. One of my best skills is seeing 5 steps ahead for people and looking at whether it makes sense or not, and what they have to look at, what they're missing. And that was, by the way, I got that from my childhood, because I had to be 5 steps ahead of my father so I didn't get beaten up. So whatever happens in your life can be used in a positive way in your life if you can isolate it and see it for what it is. But getting back to your question, after recuperating from the back surgery, I realized I needed a change in my business because I was getting bored. And I called up a friend of mine who's a well-known video guy. He's on top work. And I said, look, I'm speaking at the University of Texas. Can you come down and film my keynote? I need new footage. And I also need to rebrand. So he came down, he filmed it, and he called me the next day, Dan, and he said, I got your brand. I said, great, what is it? He goes, Velocity Mindset. And Dan, the moment he said it, it's like a bullet hit me between the eyes. And I said, I loved it, but I said, how did you come up with that? He goes, dude, I didn't come up with that. That's all you talked about in your speech. In fact, go back 10 years, it's what you've written about. So I tested 10 CEOs to see if they like the concept, marketing. They all loved it. I realized half of them thought they had an idea what I meant by it. Half of them had no clue, but they all wanted it. So we fleshed it out. I studied it. We got into what the real definition is. And we created what I call as the MAD process in the velocity mindset, which means I want you to get mad about your life. I want you to get mad, and not angry, but mad, meaning focus, intentional. Right. And MAD stands for your mindset, alignment with others, and your destiny. In the book, we put destiny as part 2, but in the speeches, we put it as the last part because it's so important. I want to end with it. But I want people to get mad to get velocity. Mindset, alignment, destiny. That's what we cover.
I love the way you put this together. I mean, this makes so much more sense. And I love the way that you've unpacked this because, like I suggested, this is not on topic not in keeping with what you're trying to say. So thank you for sharing that. That's great. Now, how has that impacted the people around you? What difference have you seen that it's made?
So I run a Chief Revenue Officer Mastermind group. These are a group of 5 to 10 CEOs, VPs of sales who come together every so often. And it used to be in person, but with COVID, it's now virtual. And they have to play hard. They have to be willing to be vulnerable because vulnerability sells. So they have to be vulnerable. They have to open up about what's really holding them back. Because the whole essence of the book is this: you can't really be a leader if you don't really understand yourself, go deep inside what works, what doesn't work, and so forth. So they had to be vulnerable, they had to play hard, and they had to help each other. They had to learn how to take critique. And the biggest challenge that people have when they take critique is they immediately start defending. They try to take that critique, let's say it's a round peg, and put it into a square hole. That's not the way to be coached. The way to be coached is not to say a word. Just let it sit in your mind and let it ruminate over a period of time and see what opens up, and you'll get more out of it. So anyway, it was peer-to-peer mentoring. They loved it. They stayed together for 5 years. And we've had people, the results, growing their company significantly. One guy came in as a VP. He left as a president of the company. Mm. We had one guy that was a VP at a huge company. I'm not going to mention the name right now, but it was a publicly traded distributor of natural foods. $2 billion he controlled, and then there was a power struggle, and he was very successful, and he decided to leave. During his membership, and I said, stay in the group. You're part of the group, and let's see what opens up for your next career. And the group helped him get into his consulting business, which he has been in since and hasn't looked back. So it's very powerful. It's helped people on a huge, deep level, both personally, professionally, and in fulfillment wise.
So what if someone reading the book, or someone that doesn't have the ability, and I'm a huge believer in groups like this and masterminds, what if someone doesn't have a mastermind? You make the comment that you should have a board meeting with yourself. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, what we talk about in the book is, so here's an odd thing. If I said that if you really want to get velocity, sometimes you just have to stop.
Right.
You sit there and go, what? But that's true, because that helps you get it off the rabbit wheel, if you will, of doing all those tasks and making sure you're on purpose. So when I mean stopping, it could be as short as, you're going into a sales call. What's my direction? Take a couple minutes to ground yourself so you do the right conversation. The example that I talk about, the board meeting, was my first sales job was selling copiers. Now, I got hired in 1980 by Royal Business Machines that came out with its first plain bond copier. In other words, no more liquid toner that spoiled your dresses or suits. It was beautiful. They seduced me with this 15 copy a minute clear. I said, where's the collator? Don't worry, I'll be here in 6 months. Where's the duplicator? Don't worry, I'll be here in 6 months. So I was psyched. I went and worked out. Started working. I couldn't sell my way out of a paper hat, and I was a good salesperson. Mm-hmm. For 4 months, I get kicking out of the offices of my butt. So I decided to have a timeout, and have a board meeting, me, myself, and I. Where do you go in New Jersey for a board meeting? Go to a diner. So I went to the diner, had a long conversation. I said, okay, what's happening? I'm getting kicked out. Why? I'm trying to sell a copier, and they compare me to the big machine on the third floor Xerox that has all these things that I can't compete with. Maybe we need to change the conversation. What does a copier do? And in my last book, Lead, Sell, Get Out of the Way, we talk about you have to sell outcomes. Well, a copier is nothing more than a communication vehicle. So that gave me an idea. My next call, I go to the office manager, and I said, would you agree with me that a copier is nothing more than just a communication vehicle? They said, absolutely. So when it comes to communications and copiers, what are your 3 biggest challenges? Oh my God, Dan. The emotions started pouring out. Sally or Bob on the first floor needs 1 copy. They have to get up. They talk to their friends along the way. They get upstairs to the 3rd floor. Now they have to wait behind these big, huge jobs, for an hour and a half. Then they come back and they sidestep to have all these conversations. By the time they're done, it's 2 hours to get 1 copy. I said, how often does this happen? She goes, try the equivalent of 2 full-time employees. I said, wow. Would you like those 2 full-time employees back? She goes, how? I said, look, I'm not competing with that Xerox machine. That's a great machine. Keep it. I'm going to fill the gap for you. I'm going to save you those 2 full-time employees. In fact, I'm not selling you 1 copy. I'm going to suggest you buy 3, 1 for every floor, to handle all the little onesies and twosies jobs, and you get those 2 full-time employees back. Then I started selling 3 at a time.
Wow.
Now, let's look at this. Did the copier change that I was selling? No. Did my company change and come through with the other things? No. What changed? Me. I looked at the outcome that I wanted to sell, make a living. This was not working. I took that time out, that board meeting. I said, what are my selling outcomes? What did you tried something different, and the results change. Otherwise, you have the rule of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. It doesn't happen. That's in our control, people. It's not anybody else's control. That's where you're looking. And we all went through this, by the way, Dan. We all went through this when COVID hit, because we all were on that hamster wheel, you know, going, and then all of a sudden we're saying, oh my God, the world's different. I've never seen it. Like, what's my life like? You know, am I really working? And then all of a sudden you see, including me, I'm moving to Florida. I'm saying, why do I have to wait till I'm 70, I'm 63 and do all these keynotes to make up for the money I lost from surgery? Go down to Florida, live in shorts, you know, go play golf now. And so we all changed. We all looked at that destiny we wanted, and we changed what we're doing. That's why it's a huge migration out of New Jersey, out of New York to Florida, huge migration out of LA to Florida and other areas. People going to Idaho. And a very nice state, I've been there, but it wasn't exactly on people's moving plans. And now all of a sudden there's a huge influx. That's because people had a forced timeout. COVID was a forced timeout. But then we all reevaluated. Companies are doing the same thing now. They're reevaluating how they're going to get back going. Yeah, they want everybody in the office. Yes, we need to be physical to have creativity. But there's different things people look at now, childcare, you know, and do I want to risk? And so while all these companies are mandating to be back, you know, we may have another surge going on right now. They're all looking at everything and they're saying, okay, what's the safest environment I can give for all my employees? And it will lead to changes in how companies operate. I don't know how big they will be. That's yet to be determined, but it will lead to changes. But that's what we talk about a direction. If you have the right direction that you're passionate about, that you believe in, you want to go there, then have it in your conscious mind. You don't have, and here's the other point. A lot of people get scared about going after something new because they don't have the answers up front.
Well, go ahead. I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
No, that's fine. If you have a question, I'll take it. I'll come back to this point.
No, well, what I was going to say is kind of circling back around to what you said and agree with you 100%. Most people are so busy thinking about themselves that they're not thinking about how they impact or what their customer needs, their customer being even their boss or whomever. So as you said, you're thinking about the solution that you're providing for the person you're trying to sell to. And a lot of people don't take the time to think about how their interaction can benefit someone else. Please go ahead.
That's a great point. Let's go into that because we talk about alignment in the book, whether you're a teacher trying to influence a child, a salesperson to a customer, and an employer to an employee, whatever, it's everything. And the first thing you have to do in the mindset we talked about is, do you accept yourself that you're a leader? If you accept yourself that you're a leader, then the first thing you have to accept is your job before you even start talking to the person is to create a safe environment for them to participate in. So you have to think ahead. So we know that if you're prospecting and calling somebody up and they don't expect you, you're an interruption to your day, to their day. What happens when they're an interruption to someone's day? They're in the middle of a thought process and you interrupt them. They have no idea who you are. Their cortisol spikes, the fight or flight hormone. They're agitated. And if all you do now is be all about yourself and puke all over them about everything you know about a product of which they may not even have an interest, they're spiking, and they're shutting down on you. But if you understand that you're a possible interruption, and you know cortisol is going to spike, then your job is to lower that cortisol to the level, not eliminate because you can't, lower it to a level where they're fully engaged so they want to have a conversation. So to give you an example, I was hired by a major financial services company. They knew the numbers. It took 5 calls to get a new investor. They wanted to bring it down to 3. Their main market was the retired community because they had one-man offices, and therefore a retiree would come in, discuss the portfolio direction, leave, they come back every quarter to evaluate, but they wouldn't do all this day trading every day that would not support a one-man operation or one-woman operation. So I went to them with some cold calls because they would cold call retirees, and we were outside Chicago, and we knocked on his door, and very polite, you know, retired couple answered the door, and the rep goes in. He's 4 to 7 years in the field, and he spent 12 minutes trying to do the social interaction, you know, looking, oh, the Bears, oh, it's a lousy game, right? They look at all the pictures of the grandchildren. And I can see the couples like being polite, but then their eyes are rolling up like, what are you doing in my house? And after 12 minutes, he finally gets to the point, and he gets to the wrong point. And he goes, I want to talk to you about stocks and bonds. And I said, thank you, but we already have somebody. Of course they have somebody. Why are you going in that conversation? So we'll get kicked out. So I said to the guy, I said, look, bring it down, the chit chat, to half a minute. Go in, say, hey, nice home, blah, blah, blah. Say, look, I'm from XYZ company. I'm not here about your stocks and bonds. I know you have somebody already. It's not what I'm here for. I'm here about your future. And if I can ask you one question, would you mind if I ask that? And most of the time, they say, sure. And the question you ask them is, what are the 3 things you want your money to provide for you? Now, we unpacked this because I stumbled into this. But then when the neuroscience findings started coming out, what did we do with that question? We took that agitated response. And by the way, even if you call an existing customer and they're not expecting you, they're still interrupted. And even if they had an appointment, you don't know what's going on in their day to mean if they really got their attention or not. So this works for everything. When you ask that question up front, you're taking that cortisol level down to the engagement area. And automatically there's a shift in them. There's a shift where all of a sudden they start thinking about where they want to go. They're no longer guarded about what you're doing here, why you're here, what are you trying to sell me. That's all gone magically. And when I do this role play on stage and I interview people, I ask them to go through the psychological feelings and say, oh my God, it was like a different world that I was in the moment of question. I started getting lost in my space, where I was going. And then invariably, because you ask for 3 challenges, they come up with 3 things. So then in the interview, I said, well, if you didn't trust this person, would you have given that 3 bits of information? They said, no. I said, well, trust is earned. So we haven't done anything yet, but we had to do something just to release oxytocin, which is a trust hormone, just to get you to give those 3 things. Would you agree? And they go, yeah. And then, are you feeling good about this conversation now? Absolutely. That's the dopamine, the feel-good hormone. And dopamine rides with oxytocin. So the point is we took a scientific concept, made it very simple, brought it down to show people, if you really want to engage people, this is how you do it. And that's what leaders have to do to get to your question. You have to see ahead. What are the potential environment that I'm going into? And what do I need to do to create a great environment to have a great conversation? And people just don't think about that.
Not at all. In fact, same conversation, different vernacular. One of the challenges that I face, that I think most people face, Ron, and you want to get your thoughts on this, is that most things in our world today are commoditized, meaning that there's no real value. Everything is the same. Everything's price driven. It's about, I've got the cheapest price, and we overlook what the other things that matter, where it was made, how it was made, who it was made by, et cetera. And the point being is that the conversation around value is overlooked. So the value that you're talking about in your situation, the value of the guy that comes in who is going to help take care of that person, who provide a future, the value of the product that you're eating, the value of the car that you're driving, et cetera. I mean, any car will get you from point A to point B, but one car might get you there better. So can you talk a little bit about how you apply this to that part of the conversation and go beyond a product being a commodity, a product even being an idea, a product being a commodity, and talk about the value and add more value to it?
So we helped a major player in a highly commodity market rewrite how the industry bought. It was reagents for copper mines. They always bought every 3 years the lowest price for volume. This company was a multinational company. They had different divisions. They all brought me in to speak. And then one division from the reagent division, Tucson, brought me in. And then the VP came up to me and goes, look, here's what we do. We bid every 3 years for price. We started this industry. We came up with a new reagent that cut in half the cost of mining copper. We saved these big mines. You come out with something like that, your sales go straight up. Then big competitors see what you got. They want to come in, they re-engineer. They're not as good as you. Then they play the price game, and that's where we're at. So we still have 60% of the world market, but we only have 25% of the largest mining copper company in the world, and we need your help. So I flew out there and I asked them the first question, what do you want as a result of my intervention? We want to win the bid. said, nah, that's not what I'm talking about. Remember direction. I want you to take out a clean piece of paper. We talk about it as a book. Forget about the past, what you know could and could not be. Forget about what you know the world to be. If you can create your destiny and dream big, no restrictions, what would it be? They said, why do we have to bid? I said, go on. So we started this industry. We said, we're going bankrupt. I said, go on. We want to negotiate a deal, no bid. I said, okay. How long? They do 3 years, 10 years. I said, okay. How much? You got 25%. We want 75%. So I repeated it and I said, look, you want to change the way they buy from 3-year bid to 10 years negotiated. You want to go from 25% to 75%. I said, yeah. And I looked at him and said, well, you can do that if you really want to, but understand the first thing, it takes a different set of actions to get there than it does to want to bid. So then they said, okay, so how are we going to get there? And I said, I have no clue. And I go, what? And this goes back to the not having the answer up front. If we're really pushing the envelope to do something we haven't done or to do something new from which there's no history, how can you possibly have the answers up front? Leaders learn one thing. It's not for them to have all the answers up front. It's for them to have the direction where they want to go, identify the tasks, and then ask the right questions, which will come to them as they think about it more often, so they can get the answers they need so that they can move forward. If we had the answers already, we would have been there already. But people get turned off because they don't have the answers, and I'm saying don't. Get turned on by the direction. So what we did was, every quarter, like that time, we looked at what do we know, what do we don't know, who's involved. They went out, they asked the questions, we choreographed, they came back, and every quarter we assessed, we tweaked, figured out what we still didn't know. The result then was at the end of 18 months, they changed the way that industry bought. They closed a 10-year, $200 million negotiated deal.
Wow.
And that's taking everything that we talked about in the velocity mindset and putting it into action. That's an example that we use to show how it works for business. But we also show how it works with the relationships with employees and how to increase productivity and so forth.
Well, I think the other thing that's really interesting that we're talking about, but really not talking about, hinting at, is that it's the relationship, as you just stated, that you have with your customer, that trust.
Yeah.
That is so critically important. It's that dialogue. It's not the, hey, buy from me because I'm a nice guy, I got a great slogan. And it's not, hey, buy from me because you need to, because everyone else does. It's how do we develop a win-win situation? Can you talk more about that?
Yeah. So you asked earlier the question, be value, we have to concentrate on value. No, I would respectfully disagree, because that will just lead us to puke about everything. I don't want you concentrating on your value. One of the traits that I tell companies to look for in the assessments we use when they want to hire salespeople and or leaders or managers is the trait of empathy. We want a high degree of empathy. We don't want a 10 out of 10, we want an 8 out of 10. 10 out of 10 means you're so empathetic, you're dropping the price just to help the customers at your expense. And then you can't support them because you have to make cutbacks because you don't have no margin. So we want an 8. Why is empathy so important? Because it means you're going to ask questions. You're going to have an interest about them, where they're trying to go. So the way to create the value is not talk about it. The way to create the value is ask where they're trying to go. What are the gaps? So for instance, in this relationship, what we did was we called the Mindsight Services Program that came out of that, where we put a man on site at our expense, but it was to help them make sure that they're using it right, help with any problems, give guided advice that helps them for their planning. That became so powerful that in the bid, they put the Mindsight Services Program, which is trademarked by my client. And the other 2 multinationals queried and said, well, what does that mean? And they said, well, if you don't have it, it means you're not qualified.
Nice.
And that gave the customer the right to pull the bid back and go into the negotiated agreement. So the point that I want your audience to make is, if you want to build value, it's not about what you have to offer. It's about where people are trying to go and the challenges they have. And then how do you pick the 1, 2, or 3 things you do so well and present it in context to how it's going to help them get to where they want to be. That's how you generate value. Because if all you do is talk about all the good things you do, 8 or 10 of them mean nothing to that customer. And they're already checking out by the time you get to the 2 most important things.
I love the way that you position them to be successful, not only that day, but well beyond.
Right.
That's really cool.
And then they renewed the agreement. 10 years later, they brought me in for that again, and they renewed it for another 5 years. And those different buyers, but they kept going.
That's cool. That's really cool. So when you talk about the role of intuitive problem solving, is this what you're talking about?
No, you mean intuition when I talk about
Yes.
intuition in the book? No. So one of the things I also learned is, when you are going after something new or a higher result you haven't gotten, you don't have the answers, sometimes you have to make a decision, because no decision is the worst thing you can do in terms of moving forward in your life. And look, we're going to make mistakes. You want to make the best decisions. You don't want to make critical mistakes, but we learn from our mistakes. So the intuition is something that I was exposed to in my late 90s, and I thought it was fluff, being a hardcore business guy. As I studied it, it's not hardcore. Think of hardcore fluff meaning. Think about what intuition is. It's nothing more than getting close to your subconscious. It's everything you know about the world to be, the biases you have, the experiences you have. It's in that cauldron of what you want to do, because you know yourself, what you don't want to do, where you want to go, what fulfillment. That's all there, right? And the intuition to work for you is only as good as the information you put into it, right? So I have to have good information. Give you an example. COVID hit, I decided I'm not going to go after these remote presentations because they're not paying. I got some retainers. I'm going to work with those clients and write the book, The Velocity Mindset. And when it comes out, we should be coming out of it. And it's exactly the way I planned it. Mm-hmm. Not COVID, but you know what I'm saying.
Sure.
So anyway, as I started doing that, I started looking at my destiny. I said, well, why am I sitting here? It's cold. I hate the winters. I now close my office in my home. I'll never walk out of here if I'm here in the winter. So I decided, let me move completely to Florida. So a year ago, September, I signed a lease for a place in Fort Lauderdale. I was going to move in November. And I just finished the book. Everything's going great. And then my intuition kicked in and said, no, you got this heart valve issue that you've been dealing with all your life. It's getting tighter. You better go get it checked out before you leave, because you may not be going to Florida. Yeah. And I'm going, oh, come on, that's ridiculous, And we all had those conversations with ourselves. But then I said to myself, wait a minute, dude. If you wrote about intuition, your intuition is talking to you. Act on it. Mm-hmm. So I went to the cardiologist, and sure enough, he pulled the fire alarm. He goes, it's so severe right now that you got 2 years max, and you could die suddenly in 6 months.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Oh. So I had the open heart surgery in November. The aorta valve was replaced. I'm in great shape. I'm in the best cardiac shape in 30 years. But I had to cancel that agreement. Now I'm moving someplace else at the end of August. But that's what intuition is. And I learned from my mentor, Paul Dominguez, who's in the book. And he told me to get to the subconscious of what your true essence is. You have to learn to listen, trust, and act. Mm-hmm. So when you don't have, and so I do this all the time to make it simple. So I'm driving down, I'm saying, oh, it looks like there's traffic, but Waze is telling me to go here. What do? Listen to Waze and make the turn. And I'll just say intuition. And if you ask the intuition, it has to come from the heart, not the mind. Mm-hmm. It's by the conscious. So if you're thinking too much, it's not the intuition, and it has to come fast. So I'll say, do I make a turn or go straight? Go straight. And I don't even debate it. I just go. Mm-hmm. That's intuition. Now, again, it's only as good as the information you put into it. So you have to do some due diligence, and you have to evaluate it, especially big decisions. And at some point, you're not going to know what to do. And you're going to say, okay, all the information I have and what I like, what I don't like, blah, blah, blah. What's my intuition saying? And then trust it. It's not always going to be perfect. But where we lose velocity is in the debates. Do I not? We waste 2 weeks, we waste 2 months, we waste a year. And time is so precious, we can't get it back. Now, I do believe in haste makes waste. So I don't mean to move forward at the rapid speed without taking that time out. about making sure where your direction's going, and about making sure your tasks are supporting that. If you don't do those three things, usually your decisions will work out.
I'm glad you said that, because I was going to circle back around to that if you didn't. A lot of people don't trust themselves. They don't know how to trust themselves. And that, I think, is sad. And then that game that they play with themselves, where they second guess themselves to death, you know what I'm talking about, which is unfortunate. So when you talk about becoming a leader, what do you mean by that? And because when I think of becoming a leader, that is also becoming a leader of yourself, being able to trust yourself, being able to know when to say yes to move and when to say no to move.
Yeah, for me, it's a huge move. I mean, look, I've traveled the world. I've done all these things, but I live within 25 square miles of my life for 65 years. I'm moving completely. My daughter is 27, and I love her much. She's going to be here. I just can't have dinner with her every night like I would. Like, but we both sat down and made the decision. This is the best thing for me, and it will help me in my career be better, more energized. It'll help me in my life. It'll help me in my relationships. And she wants me to do what's best for me, and we'll figure it out. But I'm moving at the end of August with some trepidation, but also looking for the new lifestyle that I'm going to have. So there is the doubt. But what I did was I looked at what did I want? What's that destiny? I had it very clear. It was so clear and so strong because it was so passionate for me. That's what you needed. The passion's not there. That's when we vacillate back and forth. So I was so there. I said, okay, let's go down. And went down in June, worked with a realtor, drove around. We found this great place and pulled the trigger. But you won't know until you get there.
It sounds like an exciting adventure. It sounds like you've put a lot of thought into it. So I'm excited for you.
Thank you.
That's really cool. That's really cool. I want to be respectful of your time. And so what other things have we not talked about that you want to touch on?
So I remember someone saying to me, life is nothing much more than a game. And it is a game. But where the game becomes too difficult for us is when we get lost in the emotions. And every story we tell ourselves, remember, everything we think someone did not do, we create a story around it. Every story is emotionally fueled. If you're told that you won't amount much to anything when you're young and use it as a chip in your shoulder to excel in everything you do, that's great. Use it. Don't stop using it. But monitor it, because if it becomes overused, like you become a workaholic and now it affects your family life, that's not necessarily making you successful. So you want to use the stories that have the right emotion, but fueled to make sure, because every strength, if it's overused, becomes a weakness. On the other hand, the story's not serving you well. Like my stories in my early life, I'm no good, I'll never amount to anything. My father told me, I got people criticizing me about my speech impediment and all that stuff. And I had all these physical problems because of all that emotion in my body. Rewrite it. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to rewrite it the next day. I mean, for me, it was a long process. My goal is that I don't want it to take as long for other people. If I can share these tools, and I apologize for my dog barking.
No worries.
And that's the one thing you can't control in these interviews.
No. That's okay.
But yeah, if so you just don't want. I look at all the time I wasted, and look, we're all going to waste some time. We're human. But my passion right now is, yes, I'm going to help companies grow and help them sell and lead and all that. But what I really want to do right now, in addition to that, is start the velocity mindset movement. We need it so desperately because we're in a world where everybody's blaming everybody else. Everybody's canceling everybody else. No one's listening. No one understands where other sides want to go. No one's has empathy. I want to create the velocity mindset movement where people understand they have the power to create their destiny. I give them the tools and how they can go about doing it. And my goal is for them, my wish is for them then to be better listeners out there, to be better leaders of themselves, their families, and others. And when they do that, and when they help other people get to where they want to be, they themselves then will get more in return possible. They have a thought was possible. That's my mission, to create the velocity movement, so no one wakes up after a given period of time and is despondent because they didn't achieve what they wanted to achieve while they were on this earth.
I I could not agree with you more. Thank you for sharing that. Like we started. It's all about, in my mind, personal responsibility. Stop acting like a victim,
Right.
and start living your life. Start owning
And
everything
the,
around you, and using it to your advantage.
right. And the copier story was one story that illustrated that really
Yeah.
well. And there's a lot. Last thing about the book, it's vulnerable. Vulnerable. I actually hired an editor to really help me because I write on my own, but I had to make sure that the stories I use, and that's what people like about the book. It's simple. It's not a lot of theory, but the stories, because it makes it easy to read. And people love stories. I had to make sure I did it at the right level. It wasn't about me, so I didn't want it to be too much of one thing. It was mostly about the reader getting what I intended it for them to get. The point is, Dan, vulnerability sells if used right. We
Mhm.
teach that to CEOs because they're always mandating do this. But when you start sharing about some of the struggles you've been to and how you handled the same thing when you're, people listen to that. They see that, hey, you know, these speakers on stage, I was the president of the National Speakers Association. Speakers on stage that come out so bubbly and say the world is great and there's never a problem and blah, 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 blah. You lose the audience in that way because life is full of problems. The question is, how do you handle it? That's what they want help with. They want hope. So, so I didn't want to be that speaker or consultant. I wanted to be able to share stories and the vulnerability so that they can see I'm just like them. I got the same pains, and I'm just sharing some ideas. And if you try it, if it works in your life, great. And that's the tactic that I have taken in my career.
Well, I love your illustrations. I mean, they're so inspirational. And the point, like you said, is that they're down to earth. They're believable. They're not pie in the sky. They're not something that someone else couldn't aspire to. So thank you for reaching out to me, and thank you for sharing them. And I'll be certain to put a link to them in the show notes and on the podcast webpage. And thank you for your time. I'm sorry, you were going to say something else?
Dan, if they can, in the show notes, put down the website, velocitymindset.com.
Yes, I absolutely will. Yes.
velocitymindset.com. What they'll get there's a free leadership assessment. It's 5 questions that they get grade themselves. But more importantly, there are tips and best practices on how to move forward in all those areas. So it's
Okay.
absolutely free. They can get on that site, as well as they'll get our Friday videos. And if they want to order the book, they can.
That's great. I appreciate it. And again, thank you so much for coming on today. And good luck in your move and good luck on your adventure. And I'm
Thank you.
glad you're in good health.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you for having me. And thank you for all you're doing in the world
Appreciate
today.
it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.